Hi everyone! If you didn't guess by that introduction, in today's video I will indulge you with the details of the TikTok famous Woman's Reversible Seamless Bralette by Colsey, a brand made by and sold in Target. You can find it on Target in Gainesville if it's in stock, but sadly, since the product became famous, it has been out of stock in many other places. While reviewing this product, I will focus specifically on the product's materials, its manufacturing, distribution, any international trade policies between the exporting countries, and thanks to the influence of a woman in TikTok, the growing demand for this product.
Ugh, I hate people that work at the bank. Shh, I work at the bank.
So without further ado, let's start with the materials this bralette is made of. According to Target, 94% of this piece is made of nylon, and the remaining 6% is made of spandex. Nylon is a synthetic man-made material that was created in the US by a company called DuPont. The 1980s brought a shift in its production, and the US stopped being the main manufacturer of the product. Instead, China, as well as other Asian countries like India and Indonesia, became the main manufacturers of the material. The US still produces nylon, but in lower quantities. While nylon can be tested to determine its quality, there are no certifications for the product, and it cannot be deemed as organic because it is purely man-made. A fact worth mentioning of this material is the damage produced to the environment by the creation of it. One of the main ingredients of this artificial fabric is crude oil, or specifically petroleum. Therefore, from the extraction of raw materials, harm is caused to the earth. Some collateral damage that occurs by the production of nylon is greenhouse gases, water contamination, and abundant use of energy. Similar to nylon, spandex originated in the United States. The fabric elasticity is of extreme importance to fashion and many materials, and most people own at least one piece of clothing with this. In the beginning, the US was its main producer until labor costs in Asian countries rivaled those in America. Today, countries like India, Brazil, and Pakistan are responsible for the manufacturing of its production, but most of it is produced in China. Spandex is made 85% of, and excuse my chemistry, polymer fiber. This base also comes from petroleum and has a high toll on the environment's well-being. The main issue with spandex is that a lot of clothes made of it end up in the wasteland, and this material is not biodegradable. But certain companies are reusing spandex in their clothes and can certify them with the global recycled standard. In brief, both materials are mainly produced in China. But where do they get assembled from this to this? First and foremost, Target is a large corporation with 3,500 plants around 50 countries. Talk about globalization. Most of their clothing are assembled in China and Vietnam. After that, these clothes usually travel in container cargo ships that end up in one of their 44 distribution centers in the US. The closest distribution center to Alachua County is in Lake City, Florida, which then travels by truck to Gainesville. Economic geography also studies the policies and politics behind the imports of apparel. So let's dive in to study China's and Vietnam's relationship with the US. For that, we must revisit important events of the trade war between America and China. In 2018, China imposed punitive tariffs on US technological, IP, and innovative products. Then the Trump administration retaliated by announcing in 2019 that they will impose an extra 10% of tariffs on $300 billion of textiles and apparel from China. China retaliated, and the US responded by increasing tariffs from 10% to 15%. As of May 2021, half of the products imported from China to the US still have heavy tariffs imposed on them, with the average being around 20%. However, American importers pay around 18% of that economic policy, while the Chinese manufacturers receive 1.5% less profit for that product. Let's remember that before the trade war, the US imposed an average 3.1% tariffs on Chinese goods. The tariffs on China diversified the production of fashion items to other places with cheaper prices, such as Vietnam. So what's the relationship between Vietnam and the US regarding imports? After the War of Vietnam and until the 90s, the US and Vietnam did not practice any economic activities between them. Much later, they signed the Vietnam Bilateral Trade Agreement, which jump-started their trade relationship. In 2007, after Vietnam became part of the World Trade Organization, the US declared Vietnam as a permanent normal trade relation status, which means free trade between these countries. Other important trade relationships between the US and Vietnam include the US-Vietnam Trade and Investment Framework and Agreement and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is meant to discuss activities and policies that can help the US and Vietnam grow simultaneously with actions and policies like free trade. Different with China, there are no impunity or anti-competitive tariffs imposed on Vietnam products, and that is one of the reasons why goods exported from here are increasing. However, they still must abide by certain policies. For example, textiles, which account an approximate 50% of exports from them, must follow the Office of Textiles and Apparel requirements. Studying these economic policies demonstrate that this roulette has implications on the developing world. China has grown to be a world power, but its economy still relies heavily on manufacturing and being advantageous through their cheap prices. By subjugating them to these tariffs, their products become less competitive, decreasing their exports and gains from the US. In some ways, American consumers and importers lose too because of these policies, since they must pay higher prices and consume less of their products. Before Trump's tariffs, the dependence this country had upon one another benefited them in some way. The Chinese were able to have a higher employment rate, and the US consumers were able to purchase at a lower price. In the same way, Vietnam now is competitive advantageous because of their cheap labor. In general, this dependency between the US and developing countries could pose negative economic welfare to the world if environmentally friendly practices, fair labor conditions, and internal labor redistribution are exploited or not well practiced. Whoa, that was a lot to unpack in a couple of minutes. But going back to the roulette, while this item could not have been made without globalization, international trade, competitive markets, and many other economic geographical terms, it also couldn't have become famous without TikTok. As the digital revolution continues to grow, inventions like the internet and now TikTok have the power to shape our economy by influencing consumers' behavior. This platform has become a tool that, as Mark Levinson said, makes the world smaller and the economy bigger. Target wasn't prepared for the mass demand of this product, which caused shortages in their supply. But they're taking advantage of this momentum and building rapport for their cozy brand by extending their roulette lines and products, which are praised by TikTok consumers. Target sells this bra for only $7, which means they buy it for a lesser price. Their many factories around the globe demonstrate globalization's influence and its quick and countrywide distribution. I mean, they even sell it here in Gainesville. And while the bras are cheap and cute, it is still important to understand and acknowledge all the hard work it took for it to be made, from its raw materials, extraction, to its assembly and shipment. Also, we must remember the impact this and other products pose on the environment, as well as question the labor conditions of where this was made and the lack of transparency in the industry of industrialized clothing. Thank you.